Hey everybody, this is Robert from the Merit Web Project and Merit Systems International. I've got another Therapist Builder video, and this is number 10. This one is related to the last one. It's a continuation of the Borderline series that I'm working on. And this is just our legal notice, and essentially these are just ideas and concepts for you to ponder. Certainly you don't have to do anything in here, and if you do, it's not our fault, however it turns out. And the purpose of this video series, if you've been following, it's educational. It's exposing psychological issues, showing you how to use the software, and other forms of training. Today we're going to look at the borderline concept. Again, this is another borderline video in a series of borderline videos in the Therapist Builder system. And the first number of slides are going to be reviewed from previously, so I'm going to go through these really fast. If you have not seen the Therapist Builder number 9, I suggest very strongly that you go back and go through that. You're going to miss quite a bit if you don't do that, and it's just going to be non-productive. So, maladaptation, according to the PSA and really the DSM-5 for personality disorder, is pervasive pattern of instability in interpersonal relationships, distortions or disruptions of self-image, negative emotional affects, and that usually includes rage and other forms of anger, manipulation, control of others for their own ends. Some characteristics, we've got 3 slides here. Instability in interpersonal relationships. Borderlines don't have real relationships, that's my opinion from observation. Relationships are opportunities to manipulate and control. There's a reason for that. We'll deal with that in a minute. They lack the ability to be vulnerable. Borderlines live vicariously through others whom they manipulate and control. Manipulation is usually through guilt or fear. Inability to have an open, honest, and vulnerable conversation about issues that need to be confronted. They will always resort to cowering or anger in those situations. They can't deal with facts. They'll change subjects rapidly. That's called switching, and use anger as a mechanism to shut down a conversation. Splitting, we'll deal with that. Projection, same thing. Self-image disruptions and distortions. Self is manufactured from others. They don't have, in my opinion, an intact personality. They derive their personality from other personality factors. Emotional affect disturbances include anger, even psychotic rage, intermittent explosive disorder, those type of out of control anger episodes. And a lot of times when anger is not in play, depression is. Last screen for this is they have marked impulsivity. Substance use issues are almost always in play. Not all the time, but substance, food, religion, sex, all that kind of stuff. Anything that can be taken to the excess, you're probably going to be looking at something on that list. They cross and confuse boundaries. Illogical thinking, believing, reasoning, and behaving. Self-mutilation. Cutting, burning, suicidal ideations and attempts. And next on the list, we talked about Freud last time and his concept of the id, the ego, and the superego. And the id is the devil on one shoulder, and the superego is the angel on the other shoulder. And the ego is in the middle trying to find a common ground, according to Freud. Ego dysregulation is the ability to marry the id and the superego, leading to critical identity disturbance. Due to the ego dysregulation, borderlines cannot self-identify. They identify vicariously through others. Since they cannot self-identify, they must live vicariously, and that's the reason that they have to control and manipulate, because other people are actually them. They have boundary issues, so they don't have components in their personality that they believe they need, and they will hook on to other people who have those particular facets of personality that they believe they need. Failure to control others is seen as a failure of self, and this is the real reason that borderlines have a problem with abandonment, because they're losing part of themselves and not just another person. Between 20 and 40% of all clients, according to some study, have borderline issues. I think that's very low, actually, but I would say that that's at least true, 25 to 40%. 40% is at least true. Rarely exists alone or with just a few other maladaptations. I've got a picture at the end here that will display that. Multiple maladaptations with borderline, it's the norm. Borderline appears to borrow other maladaptive characteristics from other personalities. And I said we were going to deal with splitting and projection. These are the two hallmark defense mechanisms used by borderline. What is splitting? Splitting is when the borderline praises an individual excessively, almost to the point of ridiculousness, and then a couple of days later they condemn that same person in the same vicious manner. So there's no gray, there's no in between. I love you, you're the best thing I've ever seen. I hate you, I wish you were dead. It's on or it's off. We project a negative characteristic of our own by finding or manufacturing that characteristic when we project, or something similar. It's just got to be close. And we do that with another person and bring it to light. You're a liar. That's what the borderline would say, when actually the borderline is lying. We're projecting that onto someone else. You're absolutely ridiculous. Well, no, the borderline is being ridiculous. So, thus we do not face the same negative trait that exists in us. Because we project it onto someone else, we excuse it in ourselves. We got rid of it. We gave it to somebody else. It's their issue now. It's not our issue. And the more a person projects and represses this deeper and deeper into the psyche, the worse it gets. Projectors always have scapegoats. Always got a few of them in the pocket. Projection gives a person permission to continue doing wrong and continue doing the same wrong that they're projecting. Their projections are also turned into their assets. Carl Jung dealt with the ego, and some people would say that he just absolutely did away with Freud's concept of the ego. I totally disagree. Jung's concept, as far as I'm concerned, is a maturing of Freud's concept, and let's look at it. And by the way, any quotes in here are from the archetypes of the collective unconscious from Jung. Jung's concept of the ego is slightly different than Freud's. He believed that the ego was at the center of conscious awareness. The ego is one's personality as they are aware of it. That does not mean it's their whole personality, because there are facets of each personality that a person is unaware of. And the personality is the center of the field of consciousness. And insofar as this comprises of the empirical personality, the ego is the subject of all personal acts of consciousness. That's from Jung. Ego acts as a gatekeeper, just like Freud said. It decides which contents from the unconscious are allowed into the consciousness and which will remain repressed. The ego may disregard unconscious events due to the fact that it just doesn't think that they're of material significance, or because if they're brought out into the light, they may be harmful in some way. Even though they're sublimated or repressed, those events can still influence a person's personality structure, and it'll be those dark aspects of the personality structure that the person is largely unaware of. In the days of Freud and Erikson and Jung, there was a concept of complexes. I'm really dismayed that we've gotten away from that because I think that it's very important. Jung said one interesting important feature of the personal unconscious is that groups of content may come together to form a cluster or a constellation. Jung called them complexes. A personality complex is comprised of sub-personalities. We'll see that in graphic picture form here very shortly, which can exert powerful control over thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Together they form the whole personality. While apart, they're only fragments. And this will explain some results that you've seen on PSA that you probably scratched your head about, trying to figure out what they meant or how you should deal with them, how they should be interpreted. We'll look at one of those very shortly. Freud believed that all complexes were as a result of childhood events. Jung, too, accepted that childhood events had a strong influence on the psyche. However, he expanded on that belief and stated that the root of complexes might also reside at a deeper level in the psyche. He called this the collective unconscious. We can find in the unconscious qualities that are not individually acquired, but are inherited. Predispositions, we might say. Someone is predisposed to alcoholism, to drug addiction, to sexual misconduct, to all kinds of things. These become multi-generational elements, and these are things that a lot of times we don't explore as therapists, and it's probably to our detriment that we don't. Now, this does not exclude responsibility, or it is not fatalistic of the borderline or any other condition. A person can't say, well, my dad and my grandpa were both alcoholics, so let's have another round. I'm locked into this. It's my fate. No, that's not the case at all. When to go back to a Bible story of Cain and Abel, God told Cain, sin lies at your door. You must master it. Same as the statement here today. Alcoholism lies at your door. You must master it. So it gives us a clue how deeply ingrained stuff is when we see it multi-generationally, and we may end up dealing with it in different ways, but it does not excuse the person who has those issues. Again, Jung, endless repetition from previous generations has engraved these experiences into our psychic constitution. Personality is the persona. It's a Latin word. Personality is not who a person is. A persona is a mask worn by an actor, usually on a stick that they would hold in front of their face, and one actor might have 3 or 4 different masks that they're wearing. That's what a persona, a personality is. It's what we present to the world as a social mask so that we can fit into society. This is what we believe others will find acceptable when they see it, whether it's good or bad. These are traits that we deem necessary to protect ourselves and promote ourselves in society. We're playing a role as an actor. That's all the personality is. It's not who a person is, it's who they perceive they should be in front of other people. It's a mask on a stick. Here we have some results to look at. two sets of results, this one and the next one. And this first set shows a normal maladaptive elevation. This is not a borderline complex. This is not a complex, in my opinion, at all. And you'll notice that there's 3 maladaptive elevations. However, 2 of them form a cluster C elevation. So really, you combine that as one elevation. The other one is schizoid, and his cousin is avoidant. So really, this all collapses down into avoidant C. This person has essentially one issue, and that is a very strong cluster C issue. Totally different. I'm sure you've all seen this kind of stuff. And this is where you just drop your glasses on the table and say, whatever, I don't get this. The person scored everywhere. This, in my opinion, is a borderline complex. You'll notice that the elevation here is in cluster B. Cluster B is strongly elevated. You'll notice that there are 7 maladaptations. I don't believe so. We see that there's a borderline maladaptation, and I've said that borderline is a fragmented personality, or is a partial personality, a weak personality, a personality that needs other things to make it complete. So we have the borderline here who needs to back off of people and employs the schizoid connected with the borderline to do so, or needs to promote themselves as some great hero. They connect their borderline with a narcissism. They fly off into a rage. They connect their borderline with a histrionic, and so on. Now, we're almost out of time here. We're at 17 minutes right now, so it would be foolish to begin the process of showing you how to further analyze this and maybe go on to treat it. But that will be something that happens here in this borderline series. Now, you will on occasion find a borderline that does not have 7 or 8 or 9 or all 10 lit up in the maladaptive category. You will find occasionally a borderline by itself or a borderline with 1 or 2 others. You can deal with those. That's a very strong borderline personality, as strong as a borderline can be. So you can deal with that as a normal personality maladaptation. It's when you begin to see this kind of colorization in the maladaptive scheme that you're looking at a borderline complex. It is a structure that is used by borderlines on a regular basis to marry themselves with other facets of personalities to connect themselves into a whole personality, because the personality itself is fragmented, and they use other fragments to create a complete and total puzzle when it's all done. So that's going to be the end of this, but there will be more studies here on borderline coming in the near future. And the reason I'm focusing on this is because I believe that it's not 25 to 40% borderline. I think it's 40 to 60% that contains some kind of borderline elevation. I could be wrong, but that's not what I'm seeing from my vantage point. I'm seeing a lot of borderline issues, and we need to learn how to deal with these as comprehensively as we possibly can. So that's all for now.